Okay, one thing that absolutely pisses me off about anime is whenever the show has these like super indulgent moe characters that are just so larger than life that it takes you out of the experience. You watch the show and all of the characters are these weird fucking ditzy, like, ooh, oh whoa, I just fell on this other character's panties. All this nonsense. Super idealized characters that don't feel like people. I'm watching Arm to I don't know how to say this, but Armitage III, which is not the third in the series. It's just called 3, which is basically about this battle between humanity and progress in robotics. It was made in the mid 90s as an OVA series, and it basically explores this dichotomy between humanity and the progress in robotics, because the one of the main characters, Armitage, she's basically like human but inside of a robot body. She has autonomy, she can feel, she can think, but her entire arc is just trying to figure herself out while being trapped in this robotic body. And like a lot of the conflicts surrounding this movie are of humans not wanting that progress to take place. There's a law set in place that keeps people from making robots that are autonomous. And the robots in this movie, what I find really interesting about them, like the mainstream normal robots that you see everywhere, is that they operate like moe anime characters, which by this point in the mid 90s were kind of a staple. You watched a lot of shows back then that did have like the larger than life ditzy retarded moe character. By this point, that was pretty common of a thing to have. And so what was really interesting to me about these robots is that they represented that perfectly. Like, all of the characters that we spend even a marginal amount of time with on screen who are human, they tend to feel very emotive, they tend to feel like people, they have personalities, they have layers, and you can tell that just by looking at them oftentimes because the characterization is so good. And like, I just find it so funny that the robot characters are basically anime characters, even though this is an anime. And like, they make that obvious. Like, there's this scene where the head of the robotics, where he's like the guy who's basically the top honcho in the robotics industry, like he has this robot girl come over and put her knee out, right? And then he sits on it, and she basically does nothing but like her fucking kawaii des bullshit. And like he's just sitting there talking to the guy about how we don't want to recreate another human because what value does that have to us? Why create something that is going to be imperfect when what we really want is just a fantasy? And I remember afterwards, after the detective guy leaves the building, after asking about his investigation, he ends up talking to this robot character who is telling him go home safe and all these other things. And she does it in such a way that is just very like cute and sweet. And he just remarks to himself, this is a fantasy, or something like that. And it's really interesting to me how this show is able to make its characters so layered and characterized, and then make the robots the same thing. Make them layered and characterized, but just in a different way. That their characterization is their lack of characterization. Their whole manner of being is by being one-dimensional generic anime characters that are idealized for fantasy. And I find that really interesting. I'm two episodes of this show through out of the four, and I really like it so far. There's a lot of great action. There's a lot of really, really hype moments. Animation is really good. Good show. I just watched all of Barefoot Gen, and boy, it was fucked up. Essentially, the film is about the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombings, but it mostly takes place in Hiroshima and on the outskirts. It's about a young boy and his family taking their journey through life until eventually a good number of them die. And most of the movie is just people dying horrific deaths. I think the main conceit of this movie is just to show you how horrific World War II really was for Japan. How much it hurt its people, and the details with which the movie shows that is kind of horrifying. Because there's literally a shot of a woman breastfeeding her baby as a acid rain storm comes down and starts burning her and her child as her child is sucking on her teat. What the fuck? I mean, it's probably something that could easily happen, but like, fuck, you showed it to me, you know? You showed me this like extreme reality of the war. You know, you showed me that. You showed me fucking babies dying and shit. You showed me the story of the people that happened to. You showed me the story of the people who were in this place. And that, you know, that made me feel a lot of things. Throughout watching this movie, there were certain scenes that, like, made me tingle. Because all of the people in the story, they feel real, because it's good characterization. And the events are obviously very dramatic, but, like, I was, like, certain scenes I would watch, and I felt, like, physically uncomfortable watching them. Like, my body was letting out the emotions that I was feeling. And this movie, as I was watching it, just made me more and more against the United States as a concept, on principle, in any way. Because we did that. You know, we did that shit to these real live people who existed and died horrible deaths. The United States did that. Pretty fucked up. I mean, we're not dropping bombs on people these days, but we certainly starve a number of children in the Saudi-led coalition in Yemen. You know, we certainly have led to the deaths of many people in Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan for entirely monetary and political reasons, not because of any matter of national security, not because the ends justify the means for the whole of humanity. No! It's because it's good for the top, you know. And I'm not saying that, you know, the war with Japan wasn't an unneeded thing, because they were supporting Nazis. That's not really a good position to hold, but dropping 2 atomic bombs on them is kind of a no when you have the biggest military in the world, you know. And when you have people like the Soviet Union, which is a ginormous country at that time, on your side in this matter, lots of other countries on your side in this matter, ginormous military, you just fucking bomb someone. I just, you know. But I think about all these different things the United States has done, and then I think about it in the context of this movie, and it's just, it feels bad. No. It feels bad to think about. It feels bad to think that, you know, America, this country that propagandizes itself as being this ultra bastion of freedom and solidarity and human rights, has committed a lot of human rights violations. I don't know, watching that movie, it made me feel really, really weird. I just watched all of Serial Experiments Lain, and it was really fucking good. I loved Lain as a character, even though she was a degenerate and a terrible person. I think she was really well done. All of the characters felt very real. The aesthetic of the show was on point as fuck. Like, everything about the way the show is directed, the way it looks, the way that aesthetic plays itself out, represents what the internet is, not only today, but back then really well. And in general, it was just incredibly well made. Like, I had a great time watching it. In fact, I had watched the entire thing in one sitting, which I don't normally do for shows. One of the reasons why I love OVAs and movies so much is that I can watch them very fast, and I can rewatch them without having to put in much effort. Very rarely does a show come on that exceeds more than 5 episodes that I'm able to fully call a favorite or something that is truly capturing my attention. And when that happens, I can call it something special. And Lain is one of those shows. Even though I don't consider it to be one of my favorite shows, I was able to watch the entire thing in one sitting without any interruptions, because I was just engrossed in the world, I was engrossed in the characters, I was engrossed in the outcome of the story. As many of you who've seen discussion of it online, it's very trippy. There's lots of just weird stuff going on that doesn't entirely make sense at first, but by the end, you know, you kind of piece everything together. The way the show is constructed, without spoiling anything, is very much like you're decoding the story. That the story presents itself in an abstract and esoteric way, giving you just enough to kind of know what's going on, but as the story plays itself out, eventually you understand just by connecting all of the dots together. And I think it expressed itself really interestingly through its, you know, abstract imagery and dialogue. Really interesting themes in general. One thing that I did notice about this show that I feel like the fandom of Lain don't really understand is that it's an anti-internet show. Like, for example, in this one scene, spoilers, big mega spoilers by the way, Lain basically films this footage of her friend, Arizu, like, jerking off to the thought of some guy, and then the rumor spreads online that she did that, and then it's like, oh shit, you know, why is Lain spreading some rumors? And she says that she didn't do it because the personality of hers that was around during the time that Arizu asked her, she said no, and then another personality comes out and she admits to having done it. And, like, I don't know about you, but that's some pretty fucked shit. And Lain does a lot of pretty fucked shit in the show because of the way that the internet had affected her mental state. I think the show uses a lot of, you know, very, very abstract and obtuse extreme imagery to, you know, make the more simple point that the internet is bad and that you shouldn't use it on the level that she was as a substitute for real human connections. Like, lots of characters who are actual good people in the show tend to bring up that The Wired is not reality, and Lain did not heed those warnings. She kind of just went full sail into it, and in the end, it bit her in the ass. The only way that she actually triumphs in the end, does something that's kind of pretty good, is by erasing the memory of her and of the events pertaining to the more seedy elements of the Wired from everyone, and by killing the man presenting himself as God through the internet. And I don't know about you, but I have a feeling that that's pretty, that's the most anti-internet thing that you can possibly do, is just like erasing its footprint on everybody. So there's a lot of stuff in this show where like you see like the shitty things she does, the way that she goes into a downward spiral after getting so into it, and the action she takes in the end that are, morally better than the other stuff that she had done before. It kind of all comes together in my mind as being anti-internet sentiment, And I don't really have any coherent thoughts on the show to give out like as like an analysis, just because I feel like it's a show that's been looked at and analyzed so many times that the only thing of value that I can really say is that it's good and you should watch it if you haven't. It's incredibly creative, very well made. Again, like it was a page turner for me. I wanted to watch the next episode before the next episode even came on, which is rare for anime for me, because when I watch anime, it's like, this slow, methodical process where like 20-minute episodes feel like they're 50 minutes, and this was not one of those shows. I was fully engrossed in it while I watched it. It's good shit.